When I met today's guest on My Faith with Homer and Pip seems like a couple decades ago or so. There was something very special about him. Tommy Kraus has a faith that just exudes from his heart and his soul. And as I got to know him, I know that a big part of his faith has to do with his late son, Zach, who lives on through him and just touches people every second. Welcome again, everyone, to another edition of My Faith with Homer and Pip. Homer True had the vision. He's my great buddy. He's one of the all-time greats. And Brett Young, we just can't do it without our marvelous producer. It is My Faith with Homer and Pip, and we believe that Tommy's faith story will inspire you. So Homer, as always, you tee it off, man, and hit it down the middle about 350.
You always have a great story. Tommy doesn't know the standard that you set, but you already previewed it a little bit. So now I have a new curiosity. Given the little we know, where do you start with your faith?
Where do I start? It goes back in actually, it would have been 2000. My son was born in 1999, and my wife was pregnant, so we went in for a 20-week ultrasound, and it was we were all excited with the pregnancy and all, and we find out that his head was a little bit larger than what it was supposed to be. So they sent us to Milwaukee to get a little more detailed on the ultrasound. And when they did the measurement of his head, they had decided that he could have hydrocephalus, which is fluid on the brain. So through this whole process, we are going through multiple times down to Milwaukee at St. Mary's and St. Joe's, where the ultrasounds were more 3D than anything. So as time progressed through the pregnancy, they kept measuring his brain and said that the hydrocephalus was getting a little more severe than what they anticipated. So I want to say it was like the 26-week mark, they asked us if we wanted to abort our child. And I said to my wife, I said, and we both agreed, I said, we're going to love our child no matter what, whether he's born with no arms, no legs. He's our child. He's something that God created for us. So every 2 weeks we'd have to go down to Milwaukee, and they monitored his head. And we ended up meeting with a surgeon, a neurological surgeon, Dr. Dunn, who's well known through the United States. He's now retired. And we met with Dr. Dunn, and he said to us, he goes, you know what, your child has hydrocephalus and he can live a full normal life. He's just going to be a little bit slower. My wife and I were like, hey, we can live with that. That's fine. You know, God gives us challenges and we can do this. So every 2 weeks we kept going to Milwaukee, and we were getting ultrasounds, and they ended up, so I want to say it was, my wife's a little better at that, but I want to say it was 36 weeks. They decided to do a C-section. His head was the size of an adult size head as a baby at this point. So they did a C-section on my wife. They had to cut her an extra few inches just to be able to get his head out. And of course, my wife couldn't see because the cape's up when they do a C-section. And there was 17 doctors in the room at St. Joe's in Milwaukee. And my son had passed at that point. They revived him. So my wife didn't get to see the things that I saw, which was very frightening. They got him back to life. They took him in. My wife didn't get to see him for 2 days. So it's moving forward, fast forward a little bit. Day 2 is when my wife finally got to see him, or day 3. They did brain surgery. So they put a shunt in. They relieved a full can of fluid, a 12-ounce fluid from his brain. So then that was a surgery on day 3. Time progressed. We got through a couple weeks through. We were in the NICU at St. Joe's Hospital. They were going to try to start feeding him because at this point, they couldn't bottle feed him. He kept aspirating. So second week into his birth into life, they put a GJ tube in, which I'm not sure if you're familiar. It started with a Mickey button. So a Mickey button basically is you hook a tube to their stomach so that they get all their nutrients. So moving on through that, I got to the point as a father. Now we're 3 months in at the hospital in the NICU. You kind of spend so much time with your child and you discover the things that they do and the things that they're not doing. And every time I'd go to put my face close to him, he would never blink. So I had said to the doctor, I said, he's not blinking. I can put my hand up close to him. As any normal human, you put your hands up close to somebody's face, they're going to naturally close their eyes. So then we met with Dr. Kivlin at Children's Hospital, who's an eye specialist. So we went over there, and then she had stated that he was blind. So now that was kind of another curveball that we had taken. And then we went in, we're still at the hospital. We go back to St. Joe's, and the 5 doctors that all kind of met together with how they diagnosed him. Dr. Kivlin, it was Dr. Kivlin, Dr. Rob, who was the head of neonatal care down there. They came up with a diagnosis. They called my wife and I in, and I'll never forget that. And they had diagnosed our son with Walker-Warburg syndrome, which is a very rare genetic disorder. At that time, this was in '99, so he was the only child in the state of Wisconsin, which the life expectancy of a child with Walker-Warburg syndrome is 1 year. So it was kind of like through this whole time, we just kept praying, and we kind of went off that beaten path of, we lost faith at that point. You kind of lose it and you go, God's thrown us way too much at this point. These are hard curveballs. And then every day we prayed, right? And some days were good, some days were bad. And we had to accept the fact that we had a child with a rare genetic disorder that we had to care for at home. And we found God. We kind of went away from it because we thought he was, not for us. He was against us. And my grandfather and grandmother are very religious people. And they said, don't ever question God. And we questioned him. And I guess you have that right to do that. I mean, sometimes parents, if you've never lost a child, it's the hardest thing to ever face. And my wife and I had to go through that. And we questioned him multiple times. And we fed a lot off my grandparents, who were very religious, and said, let God take his course. He doesn't give you anything that you can't handle. It's going to make you a better person. So fast forward, and then 4 more years, or I'm sorry, I take that back, 2 more years, 2.5 years. My wife we ended up losing our son in July 28th. So my wife wanted to have another child. And we lived 2 years of the blinds closed in the house. And, we bought our house with a neighborhood full of kids, and that's where we wanted to raise our child. And it was very hard seeing kids out in the front yard playing, or in the neighborhood playing, and here we sit with a child that we had lost. So my wife was like, I want to have another child. So my wife and I had a 50-50 chance of having another child that had Walker-Warburg syndrome. So Walker-Warburg was so rare, and it still is so rare at this point. And I still follow it. It was just a little blurb. That's all you could find anywhere on the internet. So we ended up joining this group of people on the internet, and that had children with Walker-Warburg syndrome. And they were all real supportive of my wife and I trying for another child. And I didn't want to, because I said, I don't want to bury another child. I mean, I was a first-time father. She was a first-time mother. And she's always kind of like the rock. And I'm the weak one, you know? So I'm the one that wears my heart on my sleeve. But she has her emotions when I'm not around. She doesn't like to show her emotions. And so we met with Dr. Breik, who's a genetics doctor in Milwaukee. She might now be retired. We sat down with her. We did some counseling sessions with her. And she said, I would really like to see you guys try again. And I said, I was real scared. And she's like, you know, are you supporting your wife? You guys got to be on the same page together. And I'm like, you know what? I would love to have another child. I'm just scared. You know, the first time you have one and you lose one, it's the worst feeling in the world. And so we met with Dr. Breik, and of course they wanted to cover this story. Pip, it's actually your ex-competition, TMJ, wanted to cover this story on our son. So they did this big story of us going to Dr. Breik down in Milwaukee, who's a genetics doctor. And so my wife became pregnant again. This time they started the ultrasounds at, I want to say it was like 15 or 16 weeks. Usually, typically they do them at 20. She says the baby's head looks perfect. You know, everything looks normal. At this point, we didn't know if we were having a boy or a girl, because when they run in boys, hydrocephalus runs a lot more in males than they do in females. So she goes, we're going to monitor this every 2 weeks. So we went down at 20 weeks. Baby's head looks great. We went down at 22 weeks. Baby's head looks great. So we get to like the 30-week mark, and then the media comes in and they're doing this whole thing. And I'm like, hey, you know, let's slow down a little bit. And they wanted to cover this whole story to do the story at the end. And we ended up having a great pregnancy. And, you know, I got that faith back in God and moved, you know, it's just, I lost it and then gained it back. And as you move forward, you kind of learn that you get curveballs thrown at you and you wonder why. And sometimes it makes you it does make you a stronger person, to be you know, to move forward. I mean, he doesn't give you anything that you can't handle. And at that point, there was a lot of times I'm like, he's giving us stuff that I can't handle. But he gave me a beautiful daughter, and she's 18 now, and she's going to be going on to nursing school, and she wants to get her PA, and, you know, she wants to get her doctorates in nursing. And so we're excited. So my faith all came together on the second time around.
My question becomes, and this is why I love my faith, how did he touch your heart, your mind, for you to handle it? I'm not necessarily saying now, I'm saying at a point where it was the hardest to do that, because I've always viewed that as one of God's greatest gifts. Somehow, some way, if you ask, he touches.
Right. You know, and I question that, Homer. It's like, you want to believe, right? I mean, the sky's the limit. And it really hurts when you lose something that's near and dear to your heart. And through the conversations, I wanted to trust my wife. I wanted to trust God, and I wanted to trust the whole thing of being a father again and the whole thing of being a mother again. And you know what? There was so many times where I laid in bed and it felt like he was talking to me, right? Like, you got to do it. Go for it. I got you this time. I tested your waters. You came through. You're a good father. You're a good mother. You were there. You're supportive. You just, because my wife would sit and we would lay in bed together and she'd just be like, we got to go for this. You got to have faith. And I'm like, I always had faith, but I kind of lost it when I lost my child. And then I had to be re-steered back into that direction again. I got off that beaten path. And you know what? I'm so blessed that I did. I'm so blessed.
All right, I go from one Tommy to another. Take it away.
Tommy, you said that things changed as far as your faith walk is concerned. How?
I guess I got to thank my grandparents. And they're very religious, God bless their souls. They're both deceased now. They said never give up, right? We all veer sometimes, and sometimes we lose that track that we're on, and it's almost like the devil pulls it to the side because he wants you to hear his side, and then you have God going, no, you need to come back close. You need to get back in with me. And sitting down having conversations with my grandparents, they've lived life. They had 7 children. They lived on. You sit there and it's like sometimes you come home from work and you decompress and you talk to your spouse. My decompression was the times having those conversations when it was one-on-one with Nancy. Pip, Nancy. And it's just we'd have those conversations. She's like, I want to go. I want to try again. And I sit there and I was so adamant about I didn't want it. And next to him, I can't compare Emily to Zach. And it was a blessing. I couldn't ask for anything better.
Zach has lived on through your heart again for as long as I've known you. Maybe it hasn't been 20 years. Perhaps it seems that way to you.
It's pretty close, Pip.
Times, but we talked a lot about your precious son, and he continues to touch so many lives as he lives on through your heart. Do you ever have a day when you don't feel close to him, Tom? Because it seems that when we look at you, if we're blessed to get to know you, it's Zach, and then it's that refound faith. And maybe that point where you surrendered to and trusted in him, not only for your beautiful Emily, but just to be able to move on for another day and another moment.
He has definitely made me a better person. I think about him every day, and it's hard. I still get people that don't know me like me or real close friends know me and say, do you have any kids? And I always say I have 2. Oh, what's her age? And I'm like, my son's 21 and my daughter's 18. And they're like, oh, what's your son doing? I said, well, my son passed away 20 years ago. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, no, he was a blessing. He was a godsend to us. He was an angel I had a personal angel, and I was fortunate to have that. Some people don't have that. There's pros and cons, and it's like Emily talks about him all the time, and Emily never got to meet him. Emily's just got memories of of us with pictures and some small video footage of him. So Emily's never had the opportunity of what Nancy and I had. And she's got pictures of him and she talks about him all the time. There's not a day that I don't go without thinking about him, you know. And then there's those days where a lot of fathers always want boys, right? I mean, we want to be the one to throw the baseball, and we want to be the one to throw the football, and you know, take him and have his first drink when he turns 21 years old, or you know, talk about girlfriends and boyfriends or whatever. But I can't have those conversations. So I try to have those conversations with Emily, and it's on a different level, right? I mean, it's like, Dad, you're strict. Dad, you're this. Dad, you're that. And I'm like, you know what, Emily? I want you to live that right path. I want you to go down that stream of knowing what's right and what's wrong, you know? And sometimes dads, and Homer, you know that. I mean, basketball, you know, football, baseball, Pip, same way. A dad wants to see his boy in sports, right? Emily, on the opposite hand, was never in sports. She was a little bit, but she was more on the smart side. She was bookworm person, you know, and so I didn't get to have those opportunities of sitting sidelines with her and being able to coach her because I love sports. And so there's those times where I think, where would he be? What would he be doing right now? Would he be playing football? Would he be playing baseball? I love baseball, and that's all I played when I was in high school and middle school and little league baseball. And I wanted to play catch with him. And you know, you try to do that with Emily, and I'm out in the front yard playing catch with her in the backyard, and she's like, I want to go in and study. Okay. You know, so it's kind of like two opposites attract, right? So, but yeah, there's not a day that goes by that I do not think about him. Not at all.
All right, Tommy, I would ask it, but I can't because you always ask it. And that is every My Faith person about if there's someone that was where you were. Because, Tommy, I think of you and go, how would you have done it without your faith or your family's assistance? Or how would you feel now if you then hadn't had a child? And Tommy, take it away. What you'd say to others.
I can't ask it any better. Tommy K, pick it up, my brother.
So I guess, you know, kids to me have always been my life. You know, I love kids. I guess, and my wife and I bought our house in '98. We only been married a year, and we bought our house in a neighborhood of kids, and we always, some people, I should say, most of us like kids, want kids, and we bought our house in a neighborhood full of kids. If we couldn't conceive, I would still want to step up and, you know, play ball with the neighbor kids in my yard, you know, and there's, it's hard to say because how do I want to say it? Homer, you kind of threw me a curveball on that one. You want to be able to have that child that you can walk hand in hand with and go to that baseball game with and throw a ball to or coach on the sidelines. If I didn't have any kids, I would still support my neighbor kids. If they said, hey, Tom, you want to come over and watch my game? I would love to. And I've done that before. Is it hard to do that? Yeah, it was hard. But being able to spend time with kids is more than anything to me. I mean, that's just like, that's the deal breaker, kids to me. I mean, and Pip, you know how much I love kids, you know? I mean, they're our future. There are basketball stars. There are baseball stars. There are football stars. There are doctors. There are nurses. There, whatever they want to be. I guess my son has taught me so much to be a better father. I mean, just to love more than you can be that part-time dad or you can be that full-time dad. And being a full-time dad, anybody can be a parent, but it's still you got to be involved in that child's life, right? And having faith with God, I mean, he never leaves your side. He doesn't. It's you that stray, right? I mean, it's you that maybe you doubt God and his choices, but he doesn't give you anything that you can't handle. And I guess he kind of there was many times and that I wanted to commit suicide. And I'm not afraid to admit that. And but then I thought I'm going to leave my wife behind, and that's not fair to her. I wanted to be with my boy because I thought that he was in heaven by himself, and I had suicidal thoughts for the first year, many times. I couldn't handle it. And then I started going outside, and the neighbor kids kind of came up to me and hey, you want, can we play ball? And that was kind of like my numbness. That was my the lick of the stamp. That was the seal that made me say, you know what? I need to change. I need to have faith. And I started gearing back towards that place. I started going back to church, and I started, I was born and raised Catholic, and we ended up going non-denominational. And so we kind of changed our whole direction. I went to an upbeat church with music, and Cedar Springs Church. We absolutely love it. And I went back to faith again. I was losing that. And when you get that little kid that's innocent that comes up to you and says, hey, can we play ball? They know nothing about me. They just want to play ball, or they want to go for a walk, or they want to go to the park, and maybe that was God saying to me, hey, if you can't have kids again, which he knew I could, why don't you take this direction and do something with it, And so it kind of changed my lifestyle. It changed from being an immature young father of 24 years old to aging me pretty quickly and maturing me. So I hope that's what you were looking for, Homer. I mean, I'm not sure if that's the answer you were looking for.
I can speak for all of humanity that it was everything and more and more. Now I want to see if Tommy can find something to add to that, because usually I say that's it, but he's proven me wrong before.
I'm just a stubborn Greek, Tommy, but I know the Holy Spirit brought us together, and this project that God put on Homer's heart, and you're here today because of that, and we're so honored. I do know this, that you live your faith. You have, as always, reached out to others, particularly kids, charity events, giving heart and soul, whether it be our great friend, the late great Mike Neufeld, and his event for muscular dystrophy. But there are people out there, Tom, who may well be considering suicide because of losing a child. It is unspeakable. Who am I or anyone else unless you've been through it? But could you offer encouragement or something, please, from your experience and your faith walk to give them some hope at a time when perhaps it's darker than ever and they're ready to give up?
So my thing is my wife Nancy always wanted me to seek help. And to me, a counselor is not going to help if they haven't walked that path. And I've said that over and over and over. Could I probably still sit down and maybe get that help that I need, or get into a group session where people have lost their child? Yeah, you know what? And I still thought of that, because there's a lot of times that I still, 20 years down the road, I still have my meltdowns. And I'll take that trip to Cedarburg, and I'll go and sit in front of his headstones and have those conversations with him, and ask him what he's doing. Hey, Dad, I'm good. Don't worry about it. And it's like you can hear that conversation, and he just says, Dad, I'm good. and keep going and take care of my little sister, right? And you just move those paths and you try to exhaust every avenue that you can. But if somebody loses a child and they're going through depression, seek help, because I didn't, and it's been 20 years, and I've often thought of sitting down and having that conversation and going, you know what, Nancy, maybe I need to go and have that conversation with a counselor. Maybe I need to get into a grieving group. She's pushed me several times to do that. And like I said, it's been 20 years and I still have those real rough moments. But I'm not going down that path. I'm just those daddy son missing, the breath, the kiss, the smell, the reaching around him and giving him a hug. And I guess if somebody's at that point, yeah, definitely somebody like myself should get help. Definitely reach out to a counselor or a grieving group that have been there. But it would definitely help.
Thank you for sharing that, Homer.
No, I'm not adding. No. I'm done.
Go ahead, Homer. Add to it.
No, I don't. I want that to be the end. I want that to be there. You know, it's the beginning of things and the ends of things. What catches people? I don't. No. Somebody hits a grand slam, I'm not asking to bat after him.
Right.
And that's my cue to say, we thank you. We love you. I know it's never easy to bare your soul, but I do know that Zach lives on through you and he's closer to you than ever. And I'm thankful that because of your faith, you have an eternal perspective. And it's just been a joy to have you, Tommy Kraus, on My Faith with Homer and Pip.
And Pip, you know, I met you, I think it was back in 2000. Well, 2000. I want to say it was 2008. I met you, and that was at that golf outing. And Pip and I had this conversation, and Sally and I were actually sitting outside, and I had thought that Sally had looked like somebody familiar who actually ended up being one of my customers, and it was Sally's sister. So Pip and I had this conversation, and Pip started this whole thing, Homer, and I fell in love with the guy, and he brings us up at a golf outing and talks about my son like he knew him for 20 years. But it's building relationships. And Homer, I've been fortunate enough to meet you, and I'm looking forward to our future golfing together and doing the Mike Neufeld golf outings. And Pip was great to introduce me to Mike, and it's just the tree expands, right? And you learn every day about somebody, and you learn their insides and outsides. And I've been very fortunate to meet Pip, and he's like a family member to me. I consider him an older brother and a very wise man. And I feel the same way, Homer, on the few times that I've been able to meet you and get to golf with you, and the things that you do for the community and the things that you do for the Mike Neufeld organization is just phenomenal. And I'm blessed to have both of you guys in my life.
And wait till you meet our producer, Brett Young, right, Homer?
Yes, it's even better.
We'll have a fearsome foursome out there on the links, Tommy. And again, our gratitude to you and for you. And if someone out there has a faith story they want to share or knows someone, we just hope and pray to touch one person. Again, that's the beauty of Homer's vision. And I think we can all say, and Tommy Kraus can say, God is good all the time. All the time, God is
Homer,
good.
you got a great thing going. Keep it going, because
We have a great thing going when people like you are willing to be open and display humanity in all its forms. And God's part of that with My Faith. But this doesn't exist unless people are willing to open as you did. And not everybody can. And to me, that's another gift that God gives in terms of the willingness to do that, even when the story is so tough.
And look at the people, though, Homer, and you and Pip can be as humble as you want, but you both have touched thousands of lives from the sports world to now with my faith, the people that you have touched, don't forget about that. And it's the people like you and Pip that keep us where we're at and keep God in our lives, right? I mean, so kudos to both of you guys for what you're doing, because I think it's fantastic.
It's been a
And
joy meeting you, Tommy
for-
Kraus. Thank you.
For Brent doing the producing too, it's awesome. You guys got a great thing going.
Yeah, he's the straw that makes that stirs the drink, as Reggie Jackson used to say.
Is that Sally in the back?
Yes, it is. She's making an appearance.
I miss Sally.
Take care, everybody. I love all you guys.
Hey, I
Appreciate
love you guys. Thanks for inviting me to your show. I appreciate it. Homer, it was great seeing you. Love you, brother. And Pip, it was great seeing you. And I love you too, pal. Sally, I love you. Brent, thanks for taking the time out of your busy day.
Have a great one, everybody.
You too, guys. Thank you.
That was awesome. I don't know how, Tommy, I don't know how you can do it. It'd be